The stars stretched endlessly across the viewport as Jake Morrison checked the damaged cargo ship one more time, and his tools floated beside him in the zero-gravity environment, while he worked on fixing the broken panel that had caused so much trouble during the past 3 hours. The distress signal came through his communicator with a sharp crackling sound that made him stop working immediately, and he pulled himself toward the control panel to check the coordinates. Because distress signals in this sector were extremely rare, and usually meant serious trouble for whoever was sending them. His ship, the small vessel he called the Wanderer, changed course automatically once he accepted the signal, and the engines hummed louder as they pushed through the empty space toward the source of the emergency call that kept repeating the same message over and over again, in a language his computer could not translate properly. 20 minutes later, Jake saw the wreckage floating in. The darkness and pieces of metal and strange materials drifted in all directions, while small fires still burned in some sections, despite the lack of oxygen, and he felt his chest tighten at the sight because this was clearly not a human vessel, maneuvered the Wanderer closer to the largest piece of wreckage, and activated his scanning equipment to search for life signs. And the computer beeped twice before showing a single weak signal coming from inside what looked like an escape pod, attached to the main hull. Jake suited up quickly and grabbed his emergency kit before opening the airlock and pushing himself toward the damaged alien ship, and his magnetic boots clicked against the metal surface as he found the pod and began working on the sealed door that refused to open normally. The emergency release finally gave way after several minutes of struggle, and the door slid open to reveal a small chamber filled with smoke and sparks, and there in the corner, strapped to a damaged seat, was a young woman who looked almost human, except for the slight blue tint to her skin and the unusual markings on her arms. Her eyes opened slowly as Jake approached, and she tried to speak, but no sound came out, and he could see she was badly injured with cuts across her face and a deep wound on her side that was bleeding a strange silver-colored fluid instead of red. Blood Jake worked quickly to release her from the safety straps, and he wrapped his emergency blanket around her shoulders before carefully lifting her weightless body and pulling her back toward his ship. And she remained conscious the entire time, watching him with wide golden eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Once inside the Wanderer, Jake laid her on the medical bed in his small cabin and activated the automated medical scanner that immediately began analyzing her biology, and the computer struggled to understand her alien physiology, but eventually provided basic treatment, instructions that Jake followed carefully. He cleaned her wounds and applied synthetic bandages that the medical unit created specifically for her unique biology, and she watched him work without saying anything, though her eyes followed his every movement with an intensity that made him feel both nervous and determined to help her. The computer finally managed to translate her language after analyzing the data from her damaged ship, and the first words she spoke made Jake smile. Despite the serious situation, because she simply said thank you in a soft voice that sounded like music combined with wind chimes. Her name was Lyra, and she told him between painful breaths that her ship had been attacked by raiders who wanted to steal the valuable cargo she was transporting to her homeworld, and she had barely managed to get to the escape pod before the main ship exploded. Jake learned that Lyra was a courier pilot who traveled between different star systems delivering important packages, and she had been doing this job for 3 years, without any major problems until the raiders found her in this remote sector, where help was unlikely to arrive quickly over the following days. As Lyra recovered from her injuries, she and Jake spent many hours talking about their different worlds and cultures, and she was fascinated by everything about Earth and humanity, while Jake found himself amazed by her descriptions of the vast alliance of alien civilizations that existed. Beyond human space, Lyra explained that her people, the Valerians, were known throughout the galaxy for their exceptional piloting skills and their natural ability to navigate through dangerous areas of space that most other species avoided. And her golden eyes could see wavelengths of light that humans could not perceive, which made her an especially valuable courier. Jake told her about his life as an independent salvager who traveled from system to system looking for abandoned ships and valuable materials that he could repair and sell. And he admitted that he often felt lonely traveling through space by himself, with only his ship's computer for company. Something changed between them during those quiet conversations in the small cabin of the Wanderer. And Lyra found herself thinking about Jake constantly when she was supposed to be resting, and she noticed how gentle his hands were when he changed her bandages, and how his brown eyes showed genuine concern whenever she winced in pain. Jake felt the change too, and he caught himself watching Lyra when she slept, and wondering what it would be like to hear her musical voice every day, instead of just the beeping of his ship's systems, and he realized with surprise that he did not want her to leave once she was fully healed. On the 7th day after the rescue, Lyra was strong enough to walk around the ship without assistance, and she stood at the viewport looking out at the stars, while Jake prepared their evening meal. And she turned to him suddenly and said that she had never met anyone like him in all her travels. Jake felt his heart beat faster as he asked what she meant, and Lyra stepped closer to him and explained that most people in the galaxy would have demanded payment for a rescue or would have simply ignored the distress signal altogether, but he had risked his life to save a complete stranger from a species he had never encountered before. She reached out and touched his hand, and her blue-tinted fingers felt warm against his skin. And she told him that Valerian culture had a tradition that when someone saved your life, you were forever connected to that person through what they called the bond of stars. Jake asked if that meant they were friends now. And Lyra laughed softly and shook her head and said it meant much more than friendship, and it meant that she trusted him completely and wanted to stay by his side if he would allow it. And her golden eyes held his gaze with an intensity that made everything clear. He told her that he had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone, and he admitted that the thought of her leaving made his chest ache in a way he could not fully explain, and he asked if she truly wanted to stay with a simple human salvager who had nothing special to offer. Lyra smiled, and the blue markings on her arms began to glow softly, and she said that he had already given her the most precious gift possible, which was her life and her future, and she wanted to share both of those things with him if he felt the same way. Jake pulled her close and wrapped his arms around her, carefully mindful of her healing injuries, and he felt her rest, her head against his chest, and they stood together in the quiet cabin while the stars moved slowly past the viewport, and everything felt right for the first time in years. The Wanderer continued its journey through space, but now it carried two souls instead of one. And Lyra taught Jake how to see the universe the way her people did, and showed him navigation techniques that humans had never discovered. And he showed her what it meant to find home not in a place but in another person. They modified the ship together, adding Valerian technology to human systems and creating something unique that represented both of their cultures. And Lyra used her contacts in the Alien Alliance to help Jake find better salvage opportunities while he taught her about human music and art and literature. Months passed and their bond grew stronger with each shared experience. And Lyra told Jake stories about her home world with its 3 moons and crystal cities, while he described Earth's oceans and forests that she promised she would visit someday. One evening as they sat together in the observation deck, Jake asked Lyra if she ever regretted staying with him instead of returning to her people, and she turned to him with those glowing golden eyes and said that saving her life had been his choice but loving him had been hers. She explained that Valerians mate for life, and when they choose a partner, they share a mental connection that allows them to sense each other's emotions, and she asked if he would be willing to accept such a bond even though he was human and it had never been done before. Jake did not hesitate, and he said yes. And Lyra placed her hands on either side of his face, and her markings glowed brighter than ever before, and he felt a sudden warmth spread through his mind, and suddenly he could feel her love and joy and hope flowing into him like starlight. From that moment forward, they were truly connected, and Jake could sense when Lyra was happy or worried, even when they were in different parts of the ship, and she could feel his steady presence in her mind like an anchor that kept her grounded. They became known throughout the outer sectors as the unusual pair who flew together in their hybrid ship and took jobs that others considered too dangerous, and their reputation grew as they helped stranded travelers and recovered lost cargo, and even negotiated peaceful solutions to conflicts between different species. Lyra never forgot that Jake had risk